Hello, I'm Corinna Harrod, and this is the Monday Night Review. Hello, and welcome to episode 89 of the Monday Night Review. I hope you're all well. It's sunny. What a difference it makes when the sun comes out. We're having a bit of a palate cleanser this week after last week's doorstep murder, which completely dominates my thoughts. I keep thinking about things I wish I'd covered, possible solutions, possible theories. I would always love to know what you think. Thanks for the lovely feedback about the episode. And again, thanks to Simon for recommending it. I love a listener recommendation. Something that has slightly taken my attention, though, is in the UK here, we've got the horrible story of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley. I've seen loads of theories going around, especially on TikTok, and I've had lots of people asking me my opinion. Weirdly. And I don't know. I don't like to speculate because these are real people's lives. I've seen so many people saying the husband definitely did it, and I know that statistically speaking, the partner is the person that has done it. But if you were going to disappear your spouse, would you do it somewhere where you could clearly be recognised? We've got a number of people who have seen Nicola on her walk that morning, and so clearly she's known, she's recognisable. One would assume that they may also know her husband, so why risk being seen? But it's really distressing. I hope that somehow she's found alive and okay, but it's not looking good. I will speculate and say that I disagree with the police. The police's theory at the moment seems to be that she went to the edge of the river to get her dog's tennis ball and fell in and drowned. I believe the dog Willow is some sort of spaniel. If I know a spaniel, I know that A, they love their balls, B, they love the water. So the thought that the ball went into the water and the dog didn't go and get it seems unlikely. But also I have 3 dogs. If they dropped their ball in a river, if they dropped anything in a river except for themselves, I would be getting them a new one. You can get them a new tennis ball. You don't go into a river fully clothed to get your dog's toy. So whether, as they believe, she slipped and fell, whether they've got mud skid marks, that kind of thing. Also, I believe my dog, if I fell into the river, would bark at me a lot from the bank of the river. So I'm not hugely convinced. But again, I'm not an expert. But this has been really dominating my thoughts. As I say, I hope she's found alive and well. But it's not looking good. Anyone who wants to speculate about who did it, keep that to yourself for now. It doesn't. It's people's lives. It's not the time to be suggesting what's been going on. Today is the palate cleanser day, and lots of you really loved the Mary Celeste episode, and so I was looking for other ghost ships. And one came up that I hadn't heard of before, but everywhere I looked in the comments on other people's videos and podcasts and things, one name kept coming up. So today we're going to talk about the mystery of Ourang Medan. I'm really sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Possibly no one knows how to say it, as we'll get into later, but this is what we're going to talk about today. And this story, I was saying to Holly, who I work with, it's like I kind of want to do a ghost ship or an urban legend. And then we were looking at things and we came up with this. And it's kind of ghost ship, sinister history crossed with an urban legend. So it's ticking all of those boxes. Because on the one hand, there seems to be no actual proof for this even happening. But on the other hand, it's in the papers at the time with a real life source. So you make up your mind and see what you think. I think I know what I think. I'll let you know when we get there. So the legend of Ourang Medan starts with a Morse code distress signal being received by several ships near the Straits of Malacca on the 13th of November 1939. The message, which was garbled and difficult to understand, made it clear that something was terribly wrong on the boat. The first message was an SOS and request for medical assistance, which was immediately relayed to the closest medical teams. I believe a French medical team and a German medical team were alerted. Remember, this is 1939, World War II. So the first message, was an SOS for medical assistance. The next message came in saying, probably second officer dead, full stop. Other members of crew also killed, full stop. Disregard medical consultation, full stop. SOS, urgent assistance, warship. The ship then gave its position and then said, crew has. Then followed words that were indecipherable. So the boat that would reach the Ourang Medan first would take 16 hours at full speed to reach her, and it's someone from this boat who is being used in these sources. So an American torpedo boat also says they're going to that position to help, but it's going to take them 24 hours. So after 16 hours, the first boat sees the Ourang Medan on the horizon. It's listing slightly, it's not flying a flag, and as they approach it, they shout through a megaphone, but they hear no response and see no movement on deck. So when they get close enough, 2 lifeboats, each carrying 8 men, are dispatched and sent to the distressed boat. But when they board the ship, they find crew members lying dead on the deck with wide open eyes and allegedly faces frozen in terror. There's no apparent physical cause of death. When they first got the distress signal, they thought perhaps mutiny or pirate attack or something like that. There's no physical signs of death or what could have caused it. And the only thing that's strange about the ship is there's this ghostly silence that hangs over it. On the captain's bridge, they find the body of the second officer, and they're able to count 12 bodies, 3 of whom were deck officers, though they calculated that a boat of that size would usually have a crew of about 40. They start to make a search of the boat when they hear an explosion from the hold and smoke spirals out from the second hatchway. They immediately abandon ship into their lifeboats and return to safety, where they watch fire engulf the Ourang Medan and burned her to the waterline before they watch her go under completely. Now, the Hampshire Telegraph reports on this on the 29th of November 1939. And they say at the end of their report, the Associated Press were informed of a ship named the Medan. I've read and watched a lot of stuff on this, and none of it mentions the fact. They all say that it was first appeared in the papers in 1940, but actually I found it quite a lot in the Mirror, the Yorkshire Post and the Hampshire Telegraph from November 1939. So this is being reported, at least in those papers, sort of 10 to 20 days after this happens. But they all use the same story. They're all using the same source. The story also made the papers in Holland, the UK, Italy, and some stories have versions of events that they change so much. And this story repeats throughout the 40s, throughout the 50s, even in the 80s. And it changes, as you can understand. Now, if you think about how inaccurate the press are nowadays with the internet at their fingers, think about how inaccurate the press could be when you didn't have the ability to just search and check everything out. So I'm getting a lot of my information from the British Newspaper Archive. So I'm looking at the exact paper from this time, but you wouldn't necessarily have that, and you wouldn't necessarily have the time or the inclination when this was available in the library to go there. So quite often things get added to make the story more readable, more appealing, which obviously I could do here just to make this podcast more appealing. But I really wanted to dig down and find what the facts were. So things that change quite often are the location. So the first stories that I've seen say the Strait of Malacca. The next up is it's near the Solomon Islands. Then it moves to the Marshall Islands, which are all thousands of miles apart. One story that seems to have become very popular is that a lone survivor, which would fit, the fact that they only found 12 bodies on a ship that would take a crew of 40 implies, and some versions say that there is a lifeboat missing, implies that perhaps there were survivors. Anyway, lone survivor arrives on the Marshall Islands to be tended to by an Italian missionary, and the man tells the missionary that the boat was carrying sulfuric acid and poisonous fumes leaked through the boat, which had been sailing from an unnamed small Chinese port to Costa Rica, deliberately under the radar to avoid authorities. Now, this survivor, who's an unnamed German, then dies, but the missionary goes to tell the Italian author Silvio Shirley. But Shirley's version of events happens in 1947. So what are the chances of a very similar incident taking place in the same area a decade apart? We'll get into that. It seems very unlikely, but actually ships did do and always will be carrying things that they shouldn't be. We did the Indianapolis a few weeks ago that was carrying the nuclear bomb. And that didn't get found as quickly as it should be because nobody was to know where it was. So the idea that this boat is trying to go under the radar, or that boats were going under the radar carrying nefarious chemicals and weapons, isn't that far-fetched. But there are lots of theories about what happened on the Ourang Medan. It doesn't really matter to the theorists what year it took place. So some believe it was a merchant ship disguised to transport chemicals or weapons. Some versions say that it was carrying sulfuric acid, potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin, or even wartime stocks of nerve gas. According to these theories, seawater got into the ship's hold, causing a reaction which in turn released toxic gases, which then seeped out and poisoned the crew. And then the sea eventually reacted with the nitroglycerin and caused the explosions that then led to the fire. This, to me, seems the most likely. I do think, well, we'll get to what I think in a minute. Or that the Japanese military, another theory is the Japanese military had been storing nerve gas in China during the war, which was then handed over to the US military at the end of the war. And because they didn't want to use a US ship to transport this, they found a non-registered ship to transport this nerve gas. The nerve gas then escaped and killed the crew. Another thought is that it's carbon monoxide that had seeped undetected throughout the ship, caused by a smouldering fire or some sort of malfunction in the ship's boiler system that might have then killed the crew. it would also have led, the fire would have led to the carbon monoxide, killed the crew, and then eventually burnt the ship. There's a lot of people who believe that it's some sort of supernatural element, that it's linked to other missing ships, that it's linked to missing aircraft. Of course, there will always be this element to it. For me, that's not a thing. Why people think this is an urban legend is there is no record found of a ship called the Ourang Medan on Lloyd's Register, which is where all ships are registered. But that could be because it wasn't big enough, or that it was transporting something illegal, or that it was a boat that was originally called one thing and changed its name and didn't tell anyone. Again, we're talking about a time that was pre the internet, pre quite so much box ticking and paperwork. And so if you set off with one name and then decided that you're going to change the name of your boat, there's not really a lot you can do if that's what you want to do until you get caught. During the Second World War, it wouldn't have been surprising to find a number of ships that had been transporting chemicals or weapons that had exploded or burnt, and there was no record of them. The fact that this event was reported in numerous papers fairly soon after the apparent incident is interesting. So when it appears in the Hampshire Telegraph, for example, there is no name given to the source and no name of the boat. It's much later on, at least a decade later on, that various ships are named. There's one that's a Greek freighter, there's the Silver Star, that are named as being the ships that get there. And that's wrong. We know that the Silver Star was not in the area at the time, but also these boats were not named in 1939. And I can see why, if you're giving this story, you might want to remain anonymous. You wouldn't want to give the name of your boat. I totally see that. What I do wonder is, I just think I can completely see why this seems to be an urban myth, but also there is so much that goes on in the military that no one wants you to know, that will go down in history with no one, that files that are destroyed that no one is ever going to know. And again, going back to the Indianapolis, if you think about how that was a registered known boat, and they did know sort of where it was, they did sort of know what was going on, and still they didn't get to it. And they sort of got to it by chance because they saw the dead bodies. So and that was a boat they knew about. It would be so easy to use a boat, a nameless boat, or a non-military boat, to carry something that you shouldn't be carrying. And if that boat disappears, well, that boat disappears. It can't be linked to you. It's got nothing to do with you. You can't do anything about it, because if you do anything about it, it links it to you. So for me, I don't think that necessarily points to it being an urban legend. I do wonder if it was a hoax, some form of light relief from the horrible news of war, some sort of intrigue, something non-war related that sort of gets people interested. Unsurprisingly, as I said earlier, the original story stemmed from the same witness, but then as time progresses, things get added on. There are notable changes. By 1955, the story has been changed to a warm summer's day in February, which it would be in that area, when the Ourang Medan sent out her distress signal. A ship's dog has been added to the list of casualties. By 1986, the date has changed once again. It's now February 1948, nearly a decade after it was first reported. And the location changes from the Strait of Malacca to the Solomon Islands, and in some versions the Marshall Islands. Despite many attempts to uncover the truth of the mystery of the Ourang Medan, it remains unsolved to this day. It's mentioned in other places. The earliest mentions of the Ourang Medan seem to be in the British press around November 1939. The Yorkshire Evening Post and the Daily Mirror both published apparent witnesses' accounts. The Resco ship is not named. Also, what it could be is it is possibly become an apocryphal story that is a mishmash of many other stories. I think that possibly during the time, especially the second era of the Second World War and the years either side, you would have things going on. You would have undercover military stuff going on, people moving things, weapons being moved, chemicals being moved, all out of the public eye and off the record. And whether someone saw something very similar to the Ourang Medan that then got mishmashed into another similar story about a boat, and then these all wind up together and the Ourang Medan becomes an example of this story. But either way, it's incredibly interesting. I'm not sure where I stand. I do think that perhaps there was a boat. It was carrying chemicals. The chemicals mixed with seawater and caused a reaction that had not been expected. And this caused the death of the crew. I don't think I go for carbon monoxide. I don't know. Because again, if you're outside, but we don't know exactly what sort of boat it was. So whether you're inside, it's so difficult to know, isn't it? But I do think that there must have been an incident in 1939 that involved a chemical gas leak on a boat that killed the crew and caused an explosion that made the ship burn. And this has been added to over the years and become this sort of spooky story that nobody quite knows the answer to. And, it's more exciting that no boat under that name has ever been found. But I'd love to know what you think. The lack of evidence and the disturbing nature of the events on board the ship have made this one of the most puzzling and enduring mysteries of maritime history. And that's the story of the Ourang Medan. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know if there are any ghost ships you'd like me to cover, anything weird like that. As always, you can send me an email, themondaynightrevue@gmail.com. You can come and find me on Patreon, The Monday Night Review, where you get mini-sodes, extra stories. I will get the t-shirts up soon as possible. You can find us on social media, The Monday Night Review. Until next time, be kind, stay safe, and always check the back seat before you drive.